Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're really jumping in feet first. We're exploring some genuinely mind-bending source material. We have this interview transcript, and it connects, well, everything from the nature of reality itself to deep ancient history, and even claims about hidden forces. Forces that, this source suggests, have been shaping our world for, well, a very long time. So our mission today, let's unpack these really complex ideas, try to see the surprising links between them, and, get a handle on what it all might mean for how you see reality. We want to cut through the noise, get to the core claims, and just a reminder before we dive in, our job here is to lay out the ideas from this source. We're aiming to understand the worldview it presents, not necessarily to say it's right or wrong, but just to help you grasp what's in the original transcript. Ready to go deep? Okay, let's unpack this.
All right, so the source kicks off with a really huge idea. Only consciousness is real. That fundamentally changes everything, doesn't it? Can you help us break down some key terms here first? Like, what does the source mean by materium and hyperspace?
Sure. So materium is basically our physical universe. Everything we can touch, see, measure from, atoms to galaxies. But the twist is, it's not seen as separate. It's described as being cut out of consciousness.
Cut out, like carved from it.
Kinda, yeah. Like a specific zone or projection from this bigger conscious reality. And this materium, our universe, it's apparently bounded. There's a barrier, also made of consciousness, called hyperspace.
Okay, so hyperspace isn't just empty void then.
Not at all, according to this. It's actually another form of consciousness, but a thicker, denser form. And it's weird because it has no dimensions like ours, no up, down, left, right, no physical location in the way we think of it.
But it still has its own reality, its own place.
Exactly. It has its own reality, its own kind of location, just not defined by our physical rules.
So if hyperspace is denser consciousness and materium is cut from consciousness, the core idea is that everything is consciousness, just different forms.
That's pretty much it. A radical redefinition, like you said.
What's striking is how the source describes human consciousness within hyperspace. It says we keep our discrete orientation and self-control. We don't just dissolve into it.
Apparently not. The source emphasizes that you retain your sense of self.
Why is that, does it say? Especially when it talks about other beings there being, well,
Yeah.
chaotic.
It doesn't fully explain the why, but it highlights it as significant. And yeah, the encounters described are vivid. You might meet little machine elves on a rickety old shelf.
Machine elves.
That's the term used. And they might warn you, don't go further. Then there are other beings. Some just seem totally zapped out on psychedelics, unable to really interact. But then a very few are described as being capable of giving real instruction, real knowledge.
Okay, machine elves, zapped out beings. And then it gets even weirder with the bug. Described as extra hyperspace. What does that mean? How is it different?
Yeah, extra hyperspace is puzzling. The description is specific. It looks like bugs, has a bug-like lifestyle. Even its social structure is like bugs.
Seriously. Like cosmic insects.
That's the imagery, yeah. And it's supposedly ancient, perhaps the oldest thing around. It's presented as incredibly powerful, too. Believes it owns the place.
Owns hyperspace.
Or maybe even more. And it uses tools reptilians as organic life forms, or even robots.
Wow. And there's that specific story, right, about encountering it.
Oh, yeah, the anecdote is wild. The person in the source describes putting up a mind barrier against the bug.
And the bug reacted.
Reacted strongly. It apparently collapsed the lab, presumably some kind of mental or hyperspace construct, and just took it away.
That's intense. It suggests these non-physical things can have direct, almost physical effects.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway.
Yeah.
These realms are deeply connected to ours. Hyperspace itself is framed as the source of novelty, where we seek novel solutions.
Like where inventions come from.
Yeah, our creativity and inventions. The source even gives an example, like learning to express a body there, almost like drawing a cartoon character of yourself.
Flexible reality. Okay.
It really highlights how different the rules are there and how those concepts can potentially influence things back here.
So we've got consciousness as the base reality, hyperspace, machine elves, this powerful bug. How does all this high-level cosmic stuff connect back to us here on Earth? Let's shift gears a bit. What does the source say about our history, about who's really pulling the strings, who's in charge?
Well, the first claim is pretty blunt. We only see the puppets.
Meaning the obvious figures, politicians, billionaires like Gates or Schwab, they aren't the real power.
According to this source, no. They're visible, maybe influential, but they're part of a structure controlled by others, hidden from view.
And where did this hidden structure originate? The source points to aliens.
Yes, specifically a space alien invasion said to have happened thousands of years ago.
In an invasion.
That's the term used. These beings arrived and basically set themselves up as gods in ancient India, Greece, Japan, the Middle East, the Americas, pretty much everywhere.
And what were they like? Benevolent gods?
Not according to this source. They're described as very brutal.
Mm.
And there's this really bizarre detail, supposedly addicted to, get this, high sniffing, the burned adrenal gland complex.
Sniffing oxidized adrenaline. Seriously?
Yes, that's the claim. A very strange addiction for supposed gods.
Okay. And these aliens, they messed with our genetics. The source talks about genetic experiments.
It does. And it makes a specific point. Our current tech, like CRISPR, the source claims it only burns out genes and chromosomes.
So we can delete, but not add.
Right. It claims humans cannot do gene insertion, only these aliens could.
And this leads to the chromosome thing.
Exactly. This is presented as a surprising fact.
Huh.
All other primates have 24 chromosome pairs. Humans have 23.
Okay.
The source claims there's a visible burn mark on our chromosomes, suggesting modification. Specifically, that genes were extracted by these aliens.
Extracted, so we were downgraded, in a way.
That seems to be the implication. Genetically modified, but by removal.
And this genetic meddling, how does it connect to the Kazarians? The source brings them up next.
It connects directly. The source claims these same space aliens, sometimes called Elohim or Davas, initially took over a population in Central Eurasia. That population later became the Kazarians.
Okay, so the Kazarians were an early group influenced or controlled by these aliens.
Yes, but then apparently the aliens abandoned the Kazarians, ditched them.
Why?
The source doesn't explicitly state why, but it says the aliens then shifted focus. They took over people in South Yemen, and those people became the Judeans, described quite starkly as GMO people.
Genetically modified organism people. Wow.
Yeah. And these Judeans, the source claims, form the basis for figures like Moses, Adam, Eve. Essentially, biblical history starts with them.
So the Kazarians got left behind while the aliens started this whole other lineage?
That's the narrative. And it leads to conflict, naturally.
The Kazarians themselves, though, don't they claim something different, something about an extra gene?
They do. The source mentions the Kazarian claim of having an additional gene insertion.
But the source disputes this.
Completely. It contrasts the Kazarian claim with its own view, that the Kazarians were actually produced by modifying Homo capensis.
Homo capensis?
Yeah, the source translates that as coneheads. And it even drops a name claiming the Rothschild family are conehead remnants.
Toneheads, like literally, okay, that's
definitely one of the more startling claims. So you have these Kazarians with, according to the source, huge angst over being abandoned by the Elohim.
Understandable, if true. Their creators just left them.
Right. And then they see these same Elohim creating biblical history with Judeans. So the source claims the Kazarians later strategically aligned themselves with the Judeans, the very people created by the aliens who abandoned them.
And together they create the Jews.
That's the assertion. And it emphasizes that the term Jew itself is a modern insertion, not found in the original Bible.
What about Ashkenazi Jews today?
The source describes them as normies, basically, regular people unaware of this whole complex hidden history and the Kazarian maneuvering behind it.
And part of that maneuvering involved stealing names. The Codex Oralinda is mentioned.
Yes, the source points to that ancient text, describing the Kazarians as name stealers. Their strategy was, allegedly, to impersonate others, take on identities, to normalize their agenda, and effectively hide behind the Jews they helped create.
Okay, this is a dense and, frankly, shocking alternate history. Ancient aliens, genetic modification, abandoned Kazarians, coneheads, name stealing. How does this ancient hidden conflict play out in more recent times? How does it connect to current events and maybe the future? Let's unpack that.
Right. This is where the source brings in the concept of the Kali Yuga.
I've heard that term. It's from Hindu cosmology, right? A dark age.
It is. But here, the source interprets it specifically as a 2,400-year cycle, a period of very low emanations for something called galactic central, like a cosmic energy dip.
A spiritual winter almost.
Sort of, yeah. A time of reduced consciousness or connection. And the key point is, the source says we are now emerging for the Kali Yuga.
Coming out of the darkness.
Exactly. Moving into what it calls an ascending Bronze Age, a period of increasing energy and potential.
But during that Kali Yuga, the Kazarians were active.
Very active, according to this. The source makes the huge claim that they invented communism.
Invented communism. It names names.
It names Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels specifically as Kazarians.
Wow. And their goal with communism?
To effectively conquer planet Earth, which the source claims they've largely done through controlling all the central banks.
Okay, control the money, control the world. But how does communism help with that?
The strategy described is about destabilization, to upset the social order, disrupt your grounding in reality. How, by attacking solid things, attacking identity itself, make everything fluid, uncertain.
And it gives example.
It gives a very specific and controversial one. It talks about hairy crabs in China.
Hairy crabs, what's that?
This source uses this term to describe transgender individuals who, it alleges, were used historically in China as spies, prostitute spies, and assassins.
That's a very specific and inflammatory claim.
It is. And the source draws a direct and equally controversial line from that to groups like Antifa today, claiming Antifa is mostly trans.
Okay, again, just relaying the source's claims here, not endorsing them. It's using these examples to illustrate a strategy of social disruption.
Exactly. Undermining traditional structures and identities to create chaos, making populations easier to control under a communist model, supposedly.
But the source says this strategy backfired, a very bad strategic move.
Yes, because this attempt to upend all of our minds and break open all of our structures, it went too far. It paradoxically caused the rest of the planet to wake up, to see the manipulation, and to start attacking the Kazarians.
So the disruption strategy inadvertently triggered an awakening.
That's the idea. And it ties back to the Kali Yuga ending. As we emerge, humanity's minds expand. We're no longer, as the source puts it, donkey-riding minds.
Donkey-riding minds.
Yeah, meaning limited, easily led minds. As our consciousness expands, we start resisting. The source is quite definitive. Humanity will overcome the Kazarians.
Why? Just because we woke up?
Partly. But also because the universe itself, the changing cosmic energies, will not allow us to progress while being dumbed down. It's like a cosmic imperative for growth.
Is there a timeline for this awakening and overcoming?
The source actually offers one. It says the last 25 years, ending roughly now, have been about acknowledgement, wrap-up, understanding.
A period of realization.
Yeah.
Explain some of the chaos, maybe.
Possibly. And this period also supposedly involves abandoning old science.
Old science.
Yeah, things like Einsteinian quantum mechanics and the Large Hadron Collider. The source dismisses them as outdated paradigms.
Outdated. But they're pillars of modern physics. What does the source suggest replaces them?
It doesn't detail the replacement, but implies they are part of the mental garbage imposed during the Kali Yuga, limiting our understanding of true reality. So the next 25 years, that's projected as the period of actively abandoning all that garbage.
Getting rid of central banks, Einsteinian physics, everything associated with the old control system.
That's the forecast. And alongside the dismantling, a huge level of inventions is expected, especially in the last 5 years or so of that 25-year period. Those inventions will supposedly set the stage for the whole next 2,400-year Bronze Age cycle.
A massive technological and societal leap, then?
Seems to be the idea, but it won't be easy.
No, especially given how the source describes the enemy in this.
Right. The Kazarians aren't just portrayed as political opponents, they're defined clinically as psychopaths.
Meaning?
Lacking empathy, lacking core human qualities like love. Therefore, they are not capable of sympathetic vibration with others.
Can they change? Can they see the error of their ways?
The source is pessimistic on that. It says they're caught with their own guilt and cannot do a culpa, cannot confess, come clean, and convert themselves.
So a fundamental inability to connect or change.
That's the description.
And all this leads up to something called hyper-novelty emergence, peaking next April.
Yeah, that sounds dramatic. The source claims by then, your underpinning for your entire worldview will be thrown over.
Everything we think we know is wrong.
Pretty much. Nothing you learned in school will turn out to be factual. That's a direct quote, essentially.
That would cause, well, utter chaos, as the source predicts.
For many, yes.
Yeah.
These private worldview collapses will likely lead to social manifestations, pushback against the powers that be.
Okay, wow. If even a fraction of this is considered, it raises a huge question. What actually makes us human in this cosmic drama? If there are psychopaths and aliens and bugs, what's our defining quality?
The source offers an answer focusing on love.
Love. How does it define that?
Not just sentimentally. It's described as a natural outgrowth of consciousness, a fundamental vibration that exists in the material world. It's presented as one of the core qualities that makes us human.
And crucially, a quality the Kazarians don't have.
Exactly. It's a key differentiator. The Course also notes this view of love might differ from some purely spiritual takes, grounding it more in our conscious, embodied existence.
Embodied existence. It also touches on incarnation, right? The process of becoming human.
It does. And it's quite the journey. It claims it takes 85 million lives to become human.
85 million. Starting as what?
Starting as a spark, then bacterium, insect, dog, progressing through many forms.
That's a long path.
A very long path. And there's a warning attached. Being a doer in the body, being incarnated here in the materium, carries risk.
Risk of what?
The risk of discontinuation. If your psychic, whatever your conscious essence, maybe isn't strong enough to handle the abuse of being in the materium.
The abuse, existence itself is abusive.
Or at least incredibly challenging, yeah. It implies a spiritual resilience is needed to keep reincarnating and progressing towards human form.
Despite all these challenges, the alleged alien influence for 12,000 years, the Kazarians for 6,000, the toughness of incarnation, the source is still optimistic.
Surprisingly, yes. The bottom line repeated often is humanity will win.
We overcome the Kazarians, emerge from the Kali Yuga.
Yes. It's framed as a multi-decade-long process, certainly not instant, but the trajectory is positive.
And maybe, the source suggests, going through the absolute worst of it is necessary.
That seems to be part of the logic. We had to experience the depths, the worst, in order to truly see it, recognize it.
And only by seeing it clearly can we make the decision to change, to move forward.
Exactly. Facing the darkness allows for the conscious choice towards progression. It's not about total destruction. It reinforces this long-term view, a progression upward, a civilization transformation. It's a tough path, but leads somewhere better.
What an absolutely wild ride that was. From consciousness being the only reality through hyperspace, ancient aliens, millennia of hidden history, genetic plots, cosmic cycles, it really does challenge just about everything you think you know.
It's definitely a massive amount to chew on, a completely different framework for reality. But yeah, the core message woven through all the chaos and warnings is ultimately one of optimism, that despite the tough road, as the source calls it, we are fundamentally in an ascending phase, moving towards higher consciousness, incredible invention, a transformation.
So wrapping this up, here's something for you, our listeners, to really think about. If you were to entertain these ideas, the deep reality of consciousness, the hidden histories, the nature of these forces, how might that fundamentally change your day-to-day life? How might it shift how you interact with people, or how you view what's happening in the world, or what the future holds? What parts of your own worldview might start to wobble or shift if concepts like these turned out to have some truth to them, something to consider?